Hey, this is Frank. Our vehicle today is a 2002 Toyota Highlander with a 3.0 liter V6 engine. This car has two trouble codes that we are going to try to fix today. It has a P0325 for knock sensor 1 and P0330 for knock sensor 2. You can disregard the other codes. For now, they have been caused because we've disconnected some sensors in the engine bay. Aside from causing possible issues with knock detection, these codes also prevent the car from going into overdrive when it gets on the highway. So it is limited by the ECU to the first 3 gears only. The knock sensors are located in the valley between the two banks. There is one knock sensor on bank 1 and one knock sensor in bank 2. And in order to access these, we will need to remove this upper intake and the lower intake. These are the parts we're going to use in making this repair. This is the gasket set because we need to replace the gaskets on the upper and lower manifold. These are the two knock sensors. Okay, these are the two knock sensors. And this is the knock sensor harness. It connects to the main harness on this end, and these two ends connect to each one of the knock sensors. These knock sensors fit in a 1 1/16 inch socket, and the suggested torque for the knock sensor is 29 foot-pounds. Here's a page from the manual showing the torque for the knock sensor up near the top. This video is for replacing the two knock sensors. It's going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be just removing the upper intake. And this is common to many jobs that are done, including changing the coils on the rear bank, changing the valve cover gasket, and so on. This first part will be covered in its own separate video. And the second part is doing the lower intake. And that's where this video is going to pick up. Please watch the separate video on how to remove the intake, and you'll see how we unfastened it from all its attachment points and set it off to the side. The intake out of the way, we are clear to access the lower intake. Let's see if we can remove this lower intake manifold without getting into too much trouble. We disconnect the injectors from the harness. Okay, next we have bolts going straight down. Let's see, 6 bolts with 12 millimeter heads. Let's break them loose. There we go. It's off. We are finally looking straight down into the location of these knock sensors in the valley between the two banks. One of the sensors is right here. Okay, there you can see it. And the other one is right next to it. See it from the other side maybe. There it is. Anyway, they are both connected to this harness. So we are going to replace the entire harness and we are going to replace both NOx sensors. And while we're at it, we're going to replace this rubber coolant hose that's in the middle. Although it's not leaking, there is no better time to do it than right now. This is a view of the NOx sensors with the coolant hose removed. You can see the NOx sensor on the front bank, the NOx sensor on the rear bank, and the NOx sensor harness. We're going to be replacing all three of these items. Now we have replaced both NOx sensors with new. We've replaced the harness with new, all the way back to where it plugs into the main harness. And there is one thing left we need to do to finish this job properly, and that is we need to remove this entire water neck. The reason is we want to replace these two gaskets with new, and they do fit right under the water neck. So to get the water neck off, we need to remove the radiator hose. Then it may actually help to remove the torque strut, okay, because it has a bracket that attaches to the water neck right back here with that bolt that's in the middle of the frame. So let's go ahead and do that. With the water neck out of the way, you can now see how the gasket is keyed under the water neck. So now we're ready to replace the gasket and start with reassembling our entire project. Here are the two new gaskets in place where they belong. Now here is the water neck and the torque strut back in place. All the bolts are now hand tight. We will snug them down to spec after we install the lower intake. This is to avoid any uneven stress on the gasket. We have replaced the coolant hose, the bypass hose, with a brand new hose. Always do this when you do this job. We have the lower intake back in place, and we're ready to start torquing all the bolts that surround it, and also we're going to torque the bolts for the water neck right over here. All these bolts, according to the manual, are torqued to 11 foot-pounds. This is the illustration from the manual showing the torque for the lower intake and the water neck. We have torqued all the bolts for the water neck and for the lower intake to 11 pounds, doing multiple passes to get everything nice and even. And we have plugged in the injectors, making sure that all the plugs connect securely and lock into place. And now we're ready to put the upper intake back on. After replacing the lower intake and torquing it, and then we replace the upper intake gasket that goes on top of the lower intake, which is a multi-layer steel gasket. We torque these 4 attachment bolts for the upper intake, and these are to be torqued to 32 foot-pounds. This is a page from the manual showing the torque for the upper intake. Once these are torqued, then we can put the evap assembly back into place and reconnect the throttle cables and the remaining connectors and hoses, and put back the air box and the air intake tube. And of course we want to re-fasten the grounds on the back of the plenum and reconnect the PCV hose and any other hoses that we've disconnected. Then we're pretty much done. That covers this job, and thank you for watching.